uses, the spectrum's right next to Verizon, to essentially build a wireless data network across the country to serve public safety. They allocated $7 billion to do that. $2 billion of it is basically upfront, and then the other $5 billion comes after the auctions, after they auction off some spectrum. So, you know, everyone throws out $7 billion, but they kind of forget to tell you there's really only $2 billion guaranteed right now until the auction. Then there's another $5 billion coming down the line. Additionally, there's $135 million for what they call state and local planning. I'll get to that here in a minute. So really what this means for public safety is that the feds are going to be building a really big data network that will replace, or could replace, your AT&T or your Verizon or your Sprint air cards. The effect that this has with public safety is that they realize $7 billion isn't going to scratch the surface on building a nationwide network. So they need as many local assets as possible. So essentially what the federal government is saying is, states, you need to tell us what you have. You need to tell us where you have fiber. You need to tell us where you have towers and microwaves and everything, and government buildings that we can put towers on so that we can help build this network. And so as part of that $135 million, they want states to start planning for that and basically saying, okay, we're going to work with the states. And now the legislation put the responsibilities for this on the states. So it kind of went back and forth. And so what they've done is they've said, we're going to build this network. And in a couple years, the state's going to have the decision to make, whether you want to opt into the network or build it yourself. And in the statute, it says the governor must make that call. Well, that's, as you can imagine, that's a big decision to make. So what they've done with this planning grant is they said, okay, states, you guys need to plan, because we need local input, we need tribal input, you guys need to figure things out. And so that planning grant is going to come down in the first quarter of 2013. And why don't you go ahead and move forward, Gerald? So what this means is that starting in January, actually starting before, the state's going to have to get together and figure out how are we going to put all this together and create a governance structure to figure out this problem from a local perspective, a state perspective, a tribal perspective, and also, oh, by the way, we have to include the feds in the whole decision as well. So we've had some, basically what I've been doing is educating as many folks as I can. We've also been working, the AdCom project was temporarily suspended while the feds are kind of figuring things out. That project's been given the green light to go ahead. So they're going to continue that. So Colorado's in a unique position because essentially we're only one of 4 states that's going to have infrastructure on the ground and basically have a network here in the next year. Whereas this whole FirstNet thing is going to take 2, 3, 4 years to get going. And so what we have to do is develop a governance structure. And the NTIA basically said there's 2 key things we want out of this planning. One is a governance structure. So we want to know how you guys are going to govern the implementation of this network from a state perspective that includes all local and tribal and state organizations. So we got to figure that one out. The second one, and please don't laugh at this, so the feds have said, you know what, we don't want to negotiate with every county, every city, and the state, and everyone for your assets. We want one place to go, and we want one single MOU that covers all the assets in the state so that when we come to you, we can say how many towers you got, how much is it going to cost us per tower to use your tower. So one MOU that covers everyone. Yeah, I heard one laugh. So as you can imagine, that's going to be a bit of a challenge. So that's one of the other things we have to use this money for. So to kind of tie this back to where I fit in, so the local technology planning teams have been out there and working with local communities. And the thing is, public safety uses a lot of these assets, but they usually don't own the assets. Usually the assets are owned by the county or the municipality that public safety entity uses. So somehow we got to bridge this gap between who has the assets, who uses the assets, the other entities at the local level, and the state. And so what we want to do is, we've started to do this, and we've actually used, I was out at Fremont County. In Fremont County, their local technology planning teams includes local public safety representatives, folks from the prison, as well as school districts and so forth, because they have a lot of fiber infrastructure. So that's what we're looking to replicate, is that fact that, if you look at schools have some of the best fiber infrastructure and broadband infrastructure out there. So we need to bring them into the fold. And so what we want to do is start trying to figure out how to implement this and bring what we've been doing on a broadband perspective, kind of overall, together with what public safety needs to do to figure this not only for 911 but also for FirstNet together to figure out how we're going to implement this, because this is a really, really big task that no one entity or no one organization can handle. So that's really what we're doing from that perspective, is right now figuring out who needs to be involved, and then once we can actually get some money to hire resources to do this, is to start going out there and working with the entire state to accomplish that really easy task of creating one MOU that covers everyone. So, and again, from OIT, our perspective is that right now, one of the things that that kind of came down from the feds is they wanted the CIO to be responsible for this. So all the states have a CIO, so they said basically the CIO of the state was responsible, to do this as a default. Our perspective is that this is really a public safety thing. We have the technical expertise to help out with that, but the operational and the tactical needs to be done by public safety. So that's what we're doing right now, is we're saying, all right, we'll coordinate the efforts and try to put these groups together and bring the folks together, but public safety needs to figure out on their own what this governance structure looks like, how it's going to operate, and then we can provide the technical support that's needed to make these decisions. So that's where we're operating as of right now, kind of by default. A lot of folks have said, well, why is the state taking the responsibility for this? And the response is that, well, we were given it. The statute's pretty clear what it does. So we'll do what we can, but the primary message is that we do realize this is too big for one entity. This really needs to be a combined effort statewide. So I think that finishes out my. Oh yeah, so kind of talking forward with public safety. We do believe everywhere we've gone, we're not just with FirstNet when we talk about broadband in general. More and more places, we show up for meetings and the local sheriff's there or the local police chief's there because they understand the broadband implementations, and that to move forward with PSAP technology, we've got to have broadband. So as we put together our overall broadband strategy for the state, everyone is very cognizant that public safety needs to be acutely aware of that, because if we can develop some kind of statewide, conglomeration of networks that tie things together, one of the biggest users will be public safety. New federal grants, the USDA has announced that moving forward, any RUS or any BIP or any kind of infrastructure projects, if they can tie in 911, so basically if you apply for a RUS grant to the USDA and you're applying to put some fiber in somewhere, if you will commit to allocating some of that fiber for public safety use, you basically get priority. You get moved to the top of the list. So we want to coordinate that. We want to get that information out there, because as private companies or local governments are applying for some of these grants, if we can get that message out there, then maybe we can get more money to come here to Colorado. Telecom reform, as I said, we're working on that process. We're educating the governor's office. The high cost fund is something that's come up quite often, and I've heard from several folks that why can't we use the high cost fund to help public safety get to next gen. And I think that's the potential. So we're basically right now trying to educate as many people as we can, taking part in the PUC process and moving forward. So again, we want to stay engaged and try to help coordinate the activities. So that is about it. So I guess at this point, any questions?
I have a question for, I'm sorry,
John.
John.
Yes.
In getting the GIS data from the, so I can look at you and talk at the same time. In getting GIS data from the local counties, are you encountering any resistance to turning that data over or sharing that data?
I don't think so too much. Nathan's doing that, and people seem to like Nathan a lot more than they like me. There are a couple of counties that have a policy of selling their data, so we're working that out. There are a couple of counties that have data sharing agreements that we're signing. We would like to use the standard data sharing agreement that we've written up that we know has been vetted by our Attorney General's office, and we think protects the county's interests in their data very well. But overall, I think it's going pretty well.
Thank you. Okay, well, it doesn't look like there's any questions, and thanks, Brian, for getting us up to date with the OIT and also up to date with our schedule today. It is almost noon. My understanding, Lynn, they were already setting up
They
downstairs,
were,
right?
yeah, he should be pretty well done.
Okay, so again, to get to the lunch area, you go out here to the right and then to the left, and there's a stairwell right there. It says to the food courts. You go down those stairs and then to your right again, and that's where the lunch area is. And if you have any trouble finding it, just follow the herds of other people, and I'm sure you'll get there. For those of you on the webcast, I'm going to go ahead and leave the webcast open, and we'll be back at 1 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Yeah, for the first responder. So,